Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 9th Emerging Growth Conference. I'm Anna Berry, and I'll be your host today. So just a few notes for those attending. This is a live, continuous event. It's beginning now and running until 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So when we switch to the next company, you'll see a black screen for a brief moment, but don't go anywhere. It's just us moving over to the next presenter. Now, if you do experience downtime for more than a minute or two, just refresh your browser and everything should work properly again. Now, our platform does work best on Google Chrome. So if you're watching from an Apple device, you have to hit the play button to start the session. As always, we have an exciting list of companies in a wide range of growth sectors presenting to you today. And our previous conferences and all conferences to come will be uploaded to the Emerging Growth Conference YouTube channel. Please subscribe. It's youtube.com/Emerging Growth Conference. During each company's presentation, you can submit questions through the webinar module, and the presenters will attempt to address as many of those as possible at the end of their presentation. So today, we have 6 companies presenting. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first. Please welcome BioRestorative Therapies, Inc. It trades on the OTC Pink sheets under the symbol BRTX and develops therapeutic products using cell and tissue protocols, primarily involving adult stem cells. Please welcome President and CEO Lance Alstodt and VP of Research and Development, we have Francisco Silva. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the introduction, Anna. I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone.
To your presentation.
Thank you. I look forward to being here. I'm Lance Alstodt. I'm the CEO of BioRestorative Therapies. With me today is my partner, Francisco Silva, head of R&D. Thank you for joining our webcast today. We appreciate everyone's interest in BioRestorative Therapies. We're very grateful and appreciative to have this opportunity to introduce our company to many people for the first time, as well as friends and family that have been supporting our company, historical shareholders since the very beginning. So we appreciate those new eyeballs on us, and we appreciate everyone else that has been there in the past. In today's presentation, we'd like to formally introduce ourselves and from a corporate perspective. We'd like to talk about our corporate background, meaning how did we get to this point in our evolution, examine with you our 2 proprietary platform technologies, discuss our potential opportunities, and really open it up to some questions towards the end. I think it's important to understand our background as a basis for why we're here today. Personally, I'm a 23-year career healthcare investment banker. I started my career in the global M&A group at JP Morgan, and then I ran medical technology investment banking at Bank of America, Merrill, Oppenheimer, and Leerink Partners. And a disproportionate amount of my time was really focused on orthopedics and spine specifically. And I had the good fortune of shaping the spine sector through equity capital raising activities and mergers and acquisitions for all the large cap strategic players, as well as the emerging growth venture capital universe, who typically back some of the emerging growth companies. I've had the opportunity to transact on behalf of companies like Globus and NuVasive, Medtronic, Stryker, J&J, Zimmer, Biomet, just to name a few. So I feel like I have some good working knowledge of how these large companies operate, what their comprehensive product portfolios really look like, and where they need to go strategically in order to maintain their required growth while also managing their own R&D budgets. So when I was introduced to BioRestorative through a member of our scientific advisory board, who is a good friend of mine, he worked with my team of PhDs, really educated us on the technology. And after studying the past human and animal data, we were super impressed with what we believe to be novel paradigm-shifting platform technology that was approved by the FDA to initiate a phase 2 clinical trial. The light bulb instantly went off, and I thought, if this company could just validate what I believe to be game-changing technology, this would be so important to the medical community such that this would be a must-have within the clinic on a very large scale. Unfortunately, which is where I saw the disconnect, and yet the greatest opportunity of all, was the company was totally hamstrung by a very suboptimal capital structure, which was developed under a different management team and at a different stage in the company's technological evolution. The structure would ultimately lead the company to an inevitable bankruptcy or Chapter 11 as of March 23rd, 2020. So I came in and I assisted the creditor group. I formulated a joint plan of reorganization where we structured and cleaned up all the outstanding claims or debt of the company. We raised approximately $4 million of fresh capital. We preserved the public entity, which is really important, and went through the judicial process of getting confirmed and emerging from Chapter 11 on November 16th, 2020, only 7 months ago. Even more importantly, we changed the philosophy of how we approach challenges and how we operate our business. We've significantly reduced our burn rates. We've restructured many of our service agreements, and we've streamlined and managed all of our professional relationships. We're very well positioned now as an emerging growth biotech company. I'm very proud of what we've accomplished in this very short period of time, and I'm even more excited about what the future has in store for the company and all of our shareholders. Let's turn to the first slide in the deck. Before we get started, I'm told that you should read this at your leisure. It's a forward-looking statement, safe harbor, that our attorneys submitted. So let me turn very quickly to our leadership page. I've just given you my background. I'll turn this over to Francisco to give a little bit of his background.
Hi guys, how's it going? This is Francisco from BioRestorative, and thanks a lot for giving us this opportunity to present to you guys today. A little bit of background on me. I'm a cell biologist by training. I trained at City of Hope National Medical Center. I worked in academia for a number of years before leaving and starting my own company in industry related to stem cell research and therapeutic development. I've published many papers in both preclinical and clinical models using cell-based therapies. I was one of the first ones to actually pioneer some work for spinal cord injury, as well as develop a lot of cell types that have been used in numerous clinical trials. One of the key interests for me over here at BioRestorative is really taking the science and what we do on the bench in the lab and really translating that into clinical applications in humans. And our lead product, BRTX 100, which we'll discuss in more detail during the presentation, it's really an interesting product from the point of view of how we're using it to treat the conditions. And it's really the philosophy of how we develop the therapeutics here. We look at the end result in terms of the development and see how we can optimize the therapeutic benefits. That's about it in terms of my background. I'm also the key inventor in the intellectual properties that we have. And so we'll move on to the next slide.
Great, thanks, Francisco. So before we get into the highlights, I just want to really kind of frame who we are at a very high level for those that have not been with us in the past. We're a publicly traded cellular therapy company with technology platform focused in 2 primary large and growing markets. Our lead product candidate is BRTX 100. It's an autologous cell-based biologic addressing degenerative disc disease. This is a platform technology that we believe will have many orthopedic applications. We, through our clinical advisors, understand that what we will attempt to do in the spine should have some very similar characteristics as some of our other avascular environments where chronic degenerative pain is prevalent. Our second program is an allogeneic product using brown adipose fat tissue and cells focused on metabolic diseases such as obesity, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, and certain areas within women's health. We believe that this is a multi-billion-dollar market opportunity for the platform, and we're well positioned to take advantage of programs into human trials as we go out onto the calendar. We are experts in cell biology, which really enable us to pursue additional clinical development opportunities, as well as collaborations with various universities and strategic partners. Our mission is really to address these debilitating diseases by providing safe and effective novel technologies to improve patient outcomes and quality of life. Now more formally, kind of like going through our deck, if you look at our company highlights, we're going to cover each of these points in greater detail throughout the presentation, but I'd like to briefly illustrate the roadmap of our investment highlights and potential for arguably what I think is the most interesting developments in cell-based science. We're going to discuss why we believe our technology is intended to be disruptive to the standard of care within both our clinical programs. Our technologies address large unmet needs in multi-billion-dollar markets. We possess a robust and diverse pipeline of products given our expertise in cell biology. Our preliminary data, which gives us the confidence to believe that our clinical work is going to be successful, is excellent and provides us with confidence that the trials will work out in all of our favors. We have a well-protected body of intellectual property with patents issued and pending in the US and in markets outside of the United States. We have relationships to explore key partnerships and collaborative opportunities with both academic centers and strategic suitors. We also have a great team of experienced executives and PhD level folks that have been there and they've done this in previous companies, so no one's technically learning on the job. Going on to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about our R&D pipeline. I turn this over to Francisco.
Yeah, so we have two key programs. One of them is autologous by nature. It's using bone marrow-derived mesenchymal stem cells isolated from bone marrow that's cultured under hypoxic conditions or low oxygen to treat chronic lumbar disc disease. We have prior human data, which we used in our IND filing, which allowed us to get directly into a phase 2, as you can see in the pipeline chart. Our Thermostat program, the platform technology, it's off the shelf. It's an allogeneic cell product that uses adipose-derived stem cells, so stem cells from fat tissue. It's a unique population called brown adipocytes, which we've been pioneering for a few years and completed some pioneering in key animal data for proof of experiments, which allowed us to expand the program into treating metabolic disorders. And the three areas that we were targeting is type 2 diabetes, obesity, and polycystic ovarian syndrome, which affects women. The next slide. So as I mentioned, we have two cell-based programs. So BRTX 100, as you know, it's our lead clinical candidate. It uses your own cells. The cells are manufactured and cultured using low oxygen. And after this slide, we'll show you a short video describing why that's so important and essential in this process and the manufacturing to really provide the key and optimal therapeutic effect. As I mentioned, we have prior human data that has provided some guidance and insight in terms of the not just the safety, but also the clinical endpoints and efficacy of BRTX 100. As I mentioned, we have a phase 2 cleared IND trial, and the markets are large in terms of treating disc disease in these type of patients. Our other program is our brown fat, so Metabolic Program. As I mentioned, we're using off-the-shelf adipose-derived stem cells. We've been pioneering the work for a number of years. We're leaders in the field. We have published manuscripts as well as many issued patents, both in the US and ex-US. And really, it's a platform technology and a sleeping giant of the company as we develop it over the next couple of months and years. It's really going to expand the breadth of the company in terms of what indications we could target.
And in this program, we have the ability to accelerate at the same time as our BRTX 100. So one thing the company wasn't able to do in the past was kind of move these programs together. And while they'll be at different phases, we'll be able to dedicate a lot of resources to that in an efficient way. So we're really excited about that opportunity. Turning to the next slide, we have a video. So let's download the video so everyone can get a clear perspective of, it's sort of an animation, which is very rudimentary and very crude, but at least it gives you an opportunity to see how BRTX is processed, how it's made, how it's delivered, and just to give you a framework for how it works.
BRTX 100 is BioRestorative's lead clinical candidate and the subject of Phase 2 FDA-cleared clinical trial for patients suffering from chronic lumbar disc disease. BRTX 100 is composed of adult stem cells that are isolated from the patient's own bone marrow. Because these cells are isolated from a patient's own bone marrow, they provide a high safety profile, thereby minimizing the risk to the patient. Stem cells play a natural and key role in maintaining and repairing tissue during injury or disease by providing signals and growth factors that initiate tissue repair. A damaged intervertebral disc leads to chronic pain and can lead to permanent disability. Stem cell-based treatments can potentially repair and have therapeutic benefits, decreasing pain and improving function. Unfortunately, a damaged disc has an extremely low oxygen microenvironment, which severely inhibits the ability of stem cells to remain alive and therefore provide lasting therapeutic benefits. BioRestorative Therapies has developed a proprietary method to address this critical issue by engineering the cells to survive this low oxygen environment, thereby providing a potent and novel biologic to treat chronic lumbar disc disease. Using proprietary methods under strict quality and regulatory controls, bone marrow and blood will be collected from the patient in an outpatient procedure and shipped to a state-of-the-art cell manufacturing facility. The bone marrow stem cells will then be subjected to our proprietary hypoxic, low-oxygen cell expansion procedure, which will enrich BRTX 100 with millions of cells that can survive the extremely low oxygen levels found in the damaged intervertebral disc. Finally, the cells will be formulated with the patient's own platelet lysate, which is prepared from the previously collected blood. This platelet lysate is rich in growth factors that allow for the cells to survive longer, thus extending the regenerative and therapeutic benefits of the stem cells in the damaged disc. BRTX 100 will then be frozen and shipped to clinical sites for use in patients. It will be administered as a single injection by a physician in a minimally invasive procedure, where it will help facilitate tissue repair and regeneration and decrease the symptoms of pain and increase function, potentially improving a patient's quality of life. In summary, BioRestorative Therapies BRTX 100 has been designed to provide a potent stem cell-based therapeutic, as well as a critical safety profile to patients. Using our proprietary hypoxic cell expansion methods, we will directly target the microenvironment of the disc, thereby potentially allowing the cells to provide long-term, sustained therapeutic benefits.
Okay, we're back to the slide deck. We're on slide 7, market opportunity. So this slide is sort of common. Slide sort of illustrates the magnitude of the problem in our country and the opportunity really to address it. While it's a bit dated, the trends have remained the same. We have over 250 adults in America. The number is probably closer to 300 million these days, where over 10% suffer from chronic lower back pain. Half of the group has been diagnosed and treated for degenerative disc disease. Approximately half of those diagnosed have discovered the pain being caused by what we believe to be a protruding or injured disc. Those with protruding discs may also not experience any pain, and conversely, with those with healthy looking discs may in fact not be injured at all or visible via kind of radiography, but still a major center for pain for that patient. So between 500,000 and 1 million patients receive some form of invasive surgical procedure totaling approximately 40 to 50 billion in surgical expenses.
We believe that our sandbox includes some defined percentage of that 12 million patients diagnosed and treated with disc degeneration. So obviously, this is a huge unmet need. There's a solution like BRTX, if appropriately validated, could really be a game changer for how we treat these patients. Next slide, which is the standard of care, clinical and economic problem. I think if you use the numbers from the previous slide, we note that there are a disproportionate amount of people in the country with chronic lower back pain caused by disc degeneration. There are many ways of addressing these problems. Very few have been able to balance the effectiveness, the safety, and the economic efficiency. We break it down between two primary categories. We have conservative treatments and we have surgical treatments. The conservative treatments, which are often recurrent, include oral medication, which can be costly to your wallet and your overall health. A majority of the hydrocodone consumption takes place in the US, despite the fact that we're only 4.6% of the world's population. 35,000 Americans are dying each year due to overdoses. And what has happened here over the last decade is opioids have become a gateway drug, which has led to heroin opioids, which have led to fentanyl and synthetic overdoses, and of course, many deaths. So why this is so relevant is that the number one reason for prescribed opioids is musculoskeletal pain. And the number one musculoskeletal pain complaint for which they are prescribed for is really back pain. So injection treatments can be more than, two. So that really kind of covers the oral medication treatment. There's always a risk and there's always a big price to pay, both in the wallet and the overall health. In the second category for injection treatments, this can be over 2 times a year with prices continuously rising and fewer people being compliant as there is lower motivation these days to visit hospitals and clinics. And lastly, under conservative treatment, we have physical therapy, which can be costly, not always covered by insurance, and is also a commitment, oftentimes, 3, 4, 5 days a week. In terms of surgical treatments, they're expensive. There is stiffer pushback these days by payers as revision rates continue to be unacceptably high, and patients generally want to avoid anything that's not minimally invasive, non-traumatic, and enables them to recover quickly. So all these factors contribute to why we believe BioRestorative or BRTX 100 is a highly superior process and product. A single treatment is cost-effective and justifiable based on the cost of alternatives. When you look at the previous data, which is optimistic and quite suggestive, we have a lot of reasons to be bullish here. We are standardizing and using a release criterion to select the most potent 40 million autologous cells. We're also introducing these cells in a single disc injection rather than 2 or 3 injections. And we're really reducing and optimizing costs and making for a very impactful, minimally invasive solution and visit to the clinician. Next slide. Sure, then go back to the previous slide.
Which is important, just to echo a little bit on what Lance was saying, that both the conservative and the surgical options are the standard of care when treating disc disorders. What's important, very important to note here, is that in this particular indication, all of the treatments, whether they're conservative or surgical, are strictly focused on treating the symptoms, not the actual underlying disease, condition, or what's causing the symptoms of pain and disability. And so this is the problem, is that the huge unmet medical need is that usually it starts off with a minor tear, or protrusion, and there's pain. You might get some discomfort, and you go to the doctor, and the doctor, prescribes you either medication, physical therapy, and you do this, and either it gets better or it doesn't. But ultimately, it will get worse over time. That's the way the pathology of disease, or this disease, evolves, and eventually you will probably need a surgical intervention, which you could see the costs here. But more importantly, the problem with the surgical interventions is that they're not very successful. So even after getting the surgery, you're still not really treating the actual disorder. You're just really dealing with the symptom. So BRTX 100 really is designed and engineered to particular target the disc environment and target the disease. What's causing the pain? How can we change the actual anatomy of the disc from a disease state to try to take it back to a more normal state? And I think that's one of the key value drivers in the BRTX 100 technology. If you go on to the next slide, we go through the manufacturing process. Basically, the patient or subject goes into the physician's office where they're identified either as a candidate that would be benefit from the procedure. Bone marrow and blood is collected at the physician's office. It's then shipped to our manufacturing facility on Long Island, New York. The product is made, the BRTX 100 is made by culturing or expanding the cells under the low oxygen environment. And then following that, it's formulated and frozen, which goes through a strict quality and regulatory checks and balances. The product, it takes about 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks for manufacturing and release, quality release, that's then shipped back to the site. And the physician thaws out the cells and injects it in a 20-minute outpatient procedure at his clinic. So it's a very straightforward process, but the key component is number 2 is the hypoxic culturing. And the reason this is so important is because the disc by design has very low vasculature, which means very little blood flow to the disc. So there's very little nutrients that are actually sent there. So because of the low nutrient and the low vasculature, it's an area that has very low oxygen. So when you inject the cells, which is the smart thing to do if you have a disc disorder, you really want to inject cells that are going to survive that harsh environment. So this is why we use hypoxic cells. Essentially, we're training the cells, as you saw in the video that we played, we're training the cells to survive this really harsh environment so they could provide the maximal therapeutic input. So this is not a Hail Mary, let's inject stem cells and see if it works and hopefully does something. This is engineered and designed to treat the disc disorder, the avascular nature of the disc, and really optimize the therapeutic potential of the cells. If you go to the next slide, this is a really important slide. We are not the first to try to treat disc disorders, which is a good thing because a lot of people have pioneered and advanced the field significantly over the years. There's a ton of animal data out there showing that this is the way to do it, the way to treat disc disorders. But more interestingly is really that there's a lot of human data out there showing that cell-based therapeutics actually have a therapeutic benefit in patients that are treated. And so there's different forms of this. The PRP, there's autologous, non-cultured stem cells that are used, and some are using stem cells. And so some of these groups have published a lot of this prior human data. It's out there, and they've all showed good potential benefits in getting this done. We've had the benefit of actually reviewing a lot of the prior human data from some of our collaborators. And what we did is we took all of that data information, we compiled it, we reviewed it, and we submitted that to the FDA to show the FDA, like, look, this is the same, very similar process in the manufacturing, very similar process in terms of stem cell properties. Can we use this as a safety data set to get us into a phase 2 directly? And they agreed after some negotiations back and forth, but ultimately we did that. And the reason that was successful was because of the prior human data that exists in these published papers. So the next step logical for us is really to get into this clinical trial, which we're working very hard to, but we're very, very optimistic that we're going to have some good clinical outcomes and we're going to meet our endpoints based on the guidance that we've had by being able to study a lot of this prior human data that we've been reviewing.
Yeah, next slide is our defined health slide. So in the spirit of disclosing what I believe to be strong validation,
and acceptance of our lead product candidate, we conducted a company-sponsored blinded study with Defined Health, which is a leading independent consulting firm, mostly used by large cap pharma, to evaluate new technologies for the purpose of collaborations, licensing, or acquisitions. So not very often a company our size does sort of a self-assessment, but in the absence of the phase 1 clinical trial, as Francisco just mentioned, we wanted to get a preview of what we could potentially expect given our technology. So the report was, very detailed, but on the slide, you'll see some of the key points, which were I think the more meaningful takeaways. We're thrilled with these conclusions. It keeps us optimistic that we're heading in the right direction with our work. And furthermore, we have great commercial opportunities ahead of us. So I'll let you read the slide at your own leisure, but it's all very positive. The next slide talks about our protocol, our clinical protocol. Again, a lot of detail, but I'll ask Francisco just to hit some of the highlights here.
Right, so it's FDA cleared IND. It's a phase 2 randomized controlled study. Patients suffer from chronic lumbar disc disease. It's a fairly straightforward study. 99 subjects, 40 million cells per disc are being used to treat. These are, again, 40 million hypoxic cultured cells, so they're all have been exposed to an extended period of time in low oxygen. So really optimize the survivability of the cells, which is common sense here. One of the key things here really is in the clinical trial design is that we're targeting patients that are suffering from only one disc disorder. And that's really important because we want to minimize the noise in terms of the readout. Once we get the clinical, we unblind the study and we could read the clinical data. Treating only one disc, when we commercialize, obviously we're going to treat all the discs that you have. But from the point of efficacy, meeting endpoints, and really, doing a well-designed trial, which is really important in the cell therapy field. You could have a great product, but if you don't design the trial correctly, you're going to fail. Is that we're really targeting that one disc. So the control is untreated versus the treatment group. So if we see positive outcomes, then it's because of the product, and we're very encouraged by that. As I mentioned, we have a lot of opportunity to review prior human data and really optimize and engineer the manufacturing process, optimize the handling of the product, the way the product is shipped, the way the product is delivered to the physician, the way the physician uses the product on the patient. All of that has been well thought out and to optimize the clinical benefits to the patient. Next slide. This is a good slide as well. This is competitive landscape. There's really one really big major player. There's a lot of academic groups doing research, but one of the biggest player that's out there treating is a company called Mesoblast that I'm sure many of you guys are familiar with. Great company doing great work for a number of years. They've made a lot of mistakes, and we've learned from them, so have they. And they're treating disc disorders as well. They're using an allogeneic cell type. They're also using bone marrow. We're using bone marrow. They're using hyaluronic acid as a delivery system. We're using autologous platelet lysate as a carrier. We have 100% animal-free culture conditions. So there's no animal products used in our manufacturing process, which really facilitates the commercialization downstream, as well as regulatory requirements by the FDA. We're in a phase 2, they're in a phase 3. But the key differentiator here is the second point, which is hypoxia. And we're really stressing this because it's important. They are using cells cultured under normal oxygen conditions. So when they inject the cells into these patients, really, they're not really optimizing the survivability of the cell. And if the cells don't survive, then the therapeutic benefits are very unlikely to be met or seen or felt by the patient.
And also the number of cells.
Yes, and the number of cells are very different in terms of what they're delivering. They're delivering far less cells based on their protocol than we are.
By order of magnitude, maybe 4 times.
Yeah, it's about 4 times. It's about 4 times lower than our dose. So they're making progress. They've had some good clinical benefits, but if you like what they're doing and you believe their data is coming out good, there's no reason to believe that our data is going to be better.
They've also set an evaluation benchmark for acceptance for cell therapy for front lower back pain.
Yep.
They've engaged in a transaction with a large German private pharmaceutical company. Clinical program working with them with milestone payments that exceed $1 million. So, it's nice that other people are starting to notice that this is an acceptable alternative to surgery and therapies, so long as it's under the auspices of the regulatory body like the FDA, which is the approach that we're taking. So we're pretty excited about that.
Good. All right, guys.
Before we jump into the metabolic program, I know we're running short of time. But also, I think this is important. I think this is a powerful statement. The chairman of our DISC advisory board, who's treated over 50,000 patients over 23 years, has never accepted an opportunity to offer any interventional therapy to treat disc pain for his patients, which is ironic because the disc is the singular most pain generator in the back. And once someone fails everything, they really have no other option available to them. And they have to kind of go on with this disc pain. And they really have just three choices. They could do nothing and live with the pain, which is kind of a non-starter in most cases. They can use opioids, which we know where that goes, or they can have a surgical procedure, which is amazingly expensive and has an unacceptably high failure rate. That may be a single or a multi-level fusion or a disc replacement. Many interventions have come and gone. However, I would argue that this is not going to be a success story in the allogeneic or extraneous device space. I firmly believe that the best opportunity we have to help these folks is to use the best that the bodies have to offer to heal themselves. And I believe that this science is the greatest opportunity that I've seen to do this. So in a nutshell, what we're talking about is what the patient is deficient in, which is their ability to heal, which is often a subtle yet potent and painful injury. Taking what they are deficient in, culturing it in a way such that we have this massive opportunity to use these cells, which can help increase circulation, reduce inflammation, reduce pain, enhance remodeling, placing it exactly where it needs to go in a way that the body just cannot do it on its own, given how harsh the environment is. So I firmly believe that this science, I know we're passionate about it, but we believe that it just absolutely makes the most sense relative to every other alternative that's currently out there.
All right, guys, I'm going to kind of go through these next couple of slides a little fast, just leave a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. We're on slide 14, which is the Thermostat Metabolic Program. As I mentioned, we've been pioneering this for a couple of years. We have a lot of good work coming out of it. We filed a lot of intellectual property, have some issued patents, and it's really involving the use of brown adipose-derived stem cells to treat metabolic disorders, which is, as you can see, is really basically affects all the organ systems. So it's a platform technology that could be used to treat a number of indications, which we're working on developing currently at BRTX. If you go to the next slide, some key highlights for the program is that we are the first ones to do a human stem cell derived brown adipose transfer in mice. We published that work in Stem Cells a few years ago, which really opened up the door for a lot of collaborations, which we set up collaborations with some industrial partners such as Pfizer, as well as a lot of academic relationships that we developed. We've been working to really finalize our preclinical work to prepare an IND for submission coming up. If you go to the next slide, it really kind of outlines what our plans are in terms of taking the program into the clinic for the metabolic program. We expect to file a drug master file with the FDA in 2021, which is this year. That will really, that's a key value driver. It's really going to open up the doors. It's a drug master file that will open up the doors for strategic partnerships and really opens up the ability for us to work more efficiently with strategic partners and collaborators as we want to take the program into the clinic. We would like to have a pre-IND meeting with the FDA as well this year to finalize our study and hopefully initiate a phase 1/2 clinical study in 2022 using our metabolic program. If you go to the next slide, it just covers intellectual property. As I mentioned, we have the 2 programs, very well protected. We have a lot of issued patents, both in the US and ex-US. If you go to the next slide, this is near-term goal.
Yeah, we talked a lot about what we intend to do. So I'm just going to keep this very brief. It's a detailed page. So we use this page as a guide. It's not something we necessarily declare as kind of hitting goals within an exact time frame. However, once we achieve our capital raising goals, we can pretty much follow the sequence and relative time frame for the goals that are stated on the slide. In terms of what we're going to be driving towards, we have approximately a dozen or so very exciting, value-enhancing catalysts that we plan to announce to the market and be measured against. We've completed all the necessary work with respect to our vendors for the phase 2 clinical trial. All the contractual work with our CMOs, CROs, have largely been agreed to, and we expect that post-funding we'll reach a definitive agreement and just jump right into the trial. In terms of the trial itself, we're going to highlight the completion of our manufacturing runs, discuss the establishment of all of our clinical sites, announce first patient in, and a clearance of a 10-person safety review by an independent committee within the FDA. In terms of our metabolic program, there's going to be a lot of activity as well, running parallel to the DISC trial. As we stated earlier, we're going to conduct preclinical animal study. We're going to issue a broader patent portfolio, both domestically and OUS. We're going to be publishing data on our obesity trial in mice. And ultimately, in the first quarter of 2020, not the first quarter, for 2022, filing a DMF, which will essentially, I think the DMF is really also a very pivotal point because it provides us a launch pad to market, collaborate, and license our cell line with potential partners around the world. This is going to be a major inflection point from a value standpoint while we continue to prosecute our BRTX 100 trial. So lastly, look, we have a great scientific advisory board. I'm not going to go through all these names, but the chairman of our advisory board is Wayne Marasco. He's a principal faculty member at Harvard Stem Cell Institute, professor at the Department of Cancer Immunology. He's a professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School. His lab is actually responsible for pioneering the use of antibody immunotherapy to prevent and treat diseases such as HIV, influenza, SARS, West Nile. In terms of our spine program, we actually have set it up so that we have a separate advisory board that's led by Jason Lippitz, chief of spine medicine for the Northwell Health System, which is the largest health system in New York. We've complemented Dr. Lippitz's skills with a variety of disciplines and domain expertise. We have surgeons, we have physiatrists, we have pain management experts, sports medicine doctors. We believe that this is this is more of a kind of a unique aspect of our technology versus many of the surgical alternatives in that we have a more inclusive group of providers delivering the product versus one type of provider. So it's not just surgeons, it's not just pain management docs, it's a continuum of all of these different disciplines, which really gives the product more possibilities in terms of its use and its distribution. So look, we're very proud of our board. They've been extremely helpful. They've been hands-on, and we look forward to taking on having them take on a much bigger role as we continue to grow. And that's really the prepared remarks in terms of the slide deck. I know we are really short of time if we have any time at all, but we're always open for Q&A, or maybe there's another opportunity for us to address questions. I'll turn it back to the moderator, Anna.
Great presentation. So many accolades from our viewers about your presentation. So thank you. We are complete with your presentation time, and we have to move on to our next. But all of these questions, and I mean tons of them, will be sent directly to you, gentlemen, so you can answer them on your own time. But thank you so much for this very thorough and important presentation you guys have.
Yeah, and thank you. We really appreciate the opportunity. We want to thank again our shareholders for being there with us throughout all of this. And again, sorry that we went over. We have a lot to cover. There's so much to talk about. We haven't really spoken to a large group before in this capacity. So we really want to be responsive to all of these questions, and we hope for an opportunity to do it in the near future. Thanks again.
Yeah, just join us on our next conference then.
Perfect.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, everyone, you're going to experience a quick black screen for a moment as we move on to the next presenter, but please stay with us because we're coming right back.